Welcome to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharan Raghavan.
From time to time, when we put up our episodes, we get questions from our audience. Recently, there's this question that has kind of gotten repeated a couple of times, where some of our listeners have asked us to speak about and expand upon this concept of PMF, which is product market fit. So, in the interest of why we started CoBB, to demystify marketing concepts and to respond to listeners on our podcast, we decided that we will take this topic up and kind of first learn about it and then possibly give our point of view, which can maybe give the listeners something to think about.
Right. Very cutely, you also gave the homework to me to prep for
Yeah.
this requested episode.
No, that I did because as part of your job, I'm sure you talk about this to a number of businesses that are starting up. So I thought you will be better placed to maybe take a broader perspective on something like product market fit and then expand it for our listeners. So let's start. Why don't you start by defining what is product market fit? Let's start from the absolute basic.
Okay. So, very simply put, product market fit is when product satisfies a market need profitably. It
Okay.
means you can acquire customers, you can grow by repeating the same things. You know the results are predictable, and you're also doing it in a cost effective, money making, profitable manner.
Interesting. So you spoke about three things: repeatability, predictability, and cost efficient money making.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. So therefore, you're talking about something which is acceptable to people, and then you're talking about scaling it up, growing it up, etc.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, and why did we talk about repeatability, predictability, cost effectiveness? What things have to be done for that?
So, repeatability and predictability would fall in the same bucket
Mm-hmm.
because PMF is achieved only when you are sure the growth is both repeatable and predictable, as in the business that you're going to get to grow your sales. This
Okay.
means you can rely on your systems to scale the business, and as you scale, your returns are exponential, as in incremental returns is what you get from your business as you scale.
Mm-hmm.
That is what the repeatability and the predictability means. You can
Okay.
build systems for the predictable nature of the business you're in. Now, the next, profitability, is one of my favorite topics, which is unit economics. We've done a
Mm-hmm.
whole demo episode on unit economics, unit
Correct.
P&L, so people can go back and watch that.
Yeah.
That if you are not making money at a unit level and you think people are liking your product, that is not product market fit, because they are not paying the money you want them to pay for you to be a thriving business. And PMF cannot be achieved that way. You cannot run promos, you can't buy sales and claim people are liking my product. Even if you are giving it for free, people will like your product because you've got a good product, most likely. But if you aren't making profitable margins on it, you cannot claim product market fit, because eventually people must be willing to pay the price you're asking them to pay to enjoy the services or the product that you're giving to them.
Okay. Interesting. Fair. Okay. So now, one caveat maybe
Hmm.
is that sometimes I'm thinking something like a quick commerce,
Hmm.
right? Sometimes there are products or services which are so far ahead of the market that intrinsically you believe people will pay for it only when they've experienced it a few times.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe you create PMF by giving your product for free for some time. Then amongst those consumers, try to get them to buy once they've kind of gotten used to it. And once this theory gets proven, then you possibly expand, as you said, with cost efficiency, etc. Is that right? Is that
Absolutely.
understanding correct?
So look at Amazon, right? Amazon Prime is a good example. They started with 500 rupees for Amazon Prime. You got so
Mm-hmm.
used to it, they took it to 999. You did not cancel your services.
Mm-hmm.
They took it to 1499.
Mm-hmm.
You've not canceled your services. That is product market fit. Yes, some people would fall away, but is this business still fine at people with the amount of people sticking on at 1499? Then yes, that's product market fit.
Okay. So fair, understood. So you described PMF quite simply.
Hmm.
Now, have you seen both sides of businesses, the investors and the founders, agreeing on this, or where does the disagreement lie, if there is any?
See, they agree when they start engaging with each other, when they sign up,
Mm-hmm.
when they kind of get on board. The problem starts a little later.
Mm-hmm.
It comes down from their perspective and the lens with which they view the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So initially in India, all the VCs were going for growth, 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 growth at all costs. And they set the grammar saying, if people are accepting a product and you're growing, you are product market fit. Your concept proven as a business.
Mm-hmm.
And because they were looking at it from a 3-year horizon at best, saying
Mm-hmm.
3 years, I will exit. I will get somebody else to come and foot the bill for the expenses I have cost the business.
Yeah.
A founder typically tends to work in the business for a much longer term perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And now, when some seasoned VCs are asking for profitability, the founders are like, oh, I need to scale back and focus on making my business profitable.
Okay.
So, if you're losing customers in trying to get your business profitable, you are not necessarily product market fit proven yet. The entrepreneurs are scaling back, saying, okay, I will not grow at all costs. I will push for growth, but I will do it profitably, which is a lot more sane. And this is where the conflict begins. Some VCs say no, grow at all costs. Now founders are scaling back. Some VCs say no, you must demonstrate profitability. It depends on the age of the business, but that is usually when the conflict arises between them.
Makes sense. Okay. So you want to get to a stage where you are growing profitably. That is when you know that you've got it right. Otherwise, you might just be fooling yourself. Okay.
Absolutely.
Fair. And then, we in the past we spoke about, TAM SAM SOM for every business startup or otherwise,
Right.
as to how you look at market and what is the overall market that you should be targeting, etc., etc.
Hmm.
Now, how does that play out, in with respect to PMF?
See, it does play out, and I'm going to contradict myself here
Mm-hmm.
because I always say start with a small niche.
Mm-hmm.
Start with a very small niche that you can talk to. Now, that is almost antithetical to your PMF
Mm-hmm.
because if you're talking to a niche and your niche accepts your product, then as you widen your target audience, you got to keep proving your PMF again and again and again, which becomes difficult. For example, if you're, say, a healthy breakfast brand and you're selling to people in metros. Now, when you expand going beyond metros, you got to prove yourself again. You're not just replacing, for example, let's say you're looking to replace Kellogg's. Now, when you go beyond metros, you got to replace whatever they're having for breakfast currently. So, how do you prove yourself again and again? So, what happens in these situations when your TAM or your total market is limited when you target a niche? People end up widening the basket of products. They start creating an assortment variety because they want to make more money from the same customer or at least the
Mm-hmm.
same channel that they're operating in. And that becomes not very profitable because most brands, when they start off at the niche stage, are not primed for cross category play. I'm talking about physical products and even services. Becomes this is when some people end up building features to their products in services, which end up costing more than they actually bring in. But
Hmm.
to keep it
Okay.
simple, if you are in a niche, you'll end up stacking your products, increasing the number of offerings you have, and that will create complexity. So you have to keep widening your audience, but do not go too niche when you start, is the advice here.
However, I'm a big fan of also accidental discoveries, Sharan. So, anyways, because you're starting up, you will catch hold of a consumer. Now,
Right?
when you're starting, you don't even know how niche that consumer is.
Exactly.
So, if you found some kind of a PMF, go ahead with it. Slowly but steadily, as you make it available, like you gave an example of breakfast cereal in metros and non-metros.
Hmm.
India, being the country that it is, there are all kind of Indias that reside in all kind of Indias. So even when you are marketing your product in metros, you will find a lot of population that exactly mirrors the behavior of a non-metro
Absolutely.
resident.
So that way, instead of going wider, they'll be going deeper into the
Deeper
same market.
in metro. And when whatever your understanding of typical metro audience is, while they will consume your product, there will be many more who will end up consuming. And the founders initiative should be to try and understand from those consumers, what are they replacing, why are they replacing, and how is their articulation different from the your traditional metro consumer. That will possibly give you great ideas of how to expand beyond metros whenever you decide to.
Absolutely.
And second thing that I learned from what you are saying is that even if you've got a fairly good PMF, good acceptance in metros, now you want to expand your basket amongst metros. So therefore you get into other things. There possibly doing cross category is something that you must avoid. Within the same category, if you are able to create more repertoire for the consumer to experience, that will be a better thing to do. The more categories you create, the more complexity you are creating for your business.
Absolutely.
So now, while we were speaking, another thing that occurs to me is that you start off with a PMF. Now, is PMF, once built, you go with it and you stand behind it, or is it an iterative process?
It's definitely iterative. So
Okay.
if you remember, I mean, I'm sure you still do, you have a gate process for every innovation in the system, right?
Yeah.
So you start with identifying the problem that is there in the market, and you create your problem product fitment first, which is also called your MVP, your minimum viable product, or also called your prototype. And you check if that's working. And if that is working, then you evolve into a get to market fit phase. So you are ready to go to market, but you are still not, willing to invest in very fixed costs for your distribution and availability. So you go after your most lowest hanging channels to reach your ideal customers, so that your fixed costs are minimal, your variable costs are there, and you will know if people are picking up your product or not.
Okay. And I think as you expand from a niche to a wider consumer base, even then you start learning more and more things about your PMF. And that also, goes into that iterative phase over and over again.
Right.
Okay, fair. In fact, one of these days, I was listening to this Go Zero on Barbershop, right? Where the founder mentioned that he had, proven product channel fit.
Yes.
Yeah. And how is that different? How does that speak to PMF?
It's the exact same thing, right? It's the same
Okay.
get to market fitment, saying you identifying the lowest hanging fruit of channel that you can reach your customers through. See, we see it's not unique to Go Zero. I know he mentioned it. I know he articulated it really well, but it's not very unique. So we see a lot of FMCG brands today leverage quick commerce as a way to market entry.
Yes, I've
It
seen that
isn't,
here also.
so it's not unique to Go Zero. A lot of business do this. And even before quick commerce was there, people did e-grocer, e-commerce. And if you remember, even modern trade, there were brands that even we launched at Cadbury, which were primarily for modern trade. Doesn't mean they would not be sold outside of modern trade, but they were
Correct.
concept proven in modern trade channels in the organized supermarkets first, before
Correct.
being amplified in distribution. That's the same thing.
Yeah, I remember I launched Gem Surprise first in
Right.
Hypercity in Malad. That was the first store where we launched anywhere across India.
Hmm.
And you're right. We remained in modern trade for at least, I think 3 to 6 months before we expanded to traditional trade.
Right.
And that was the what you can call as product channel fit before
Absolutely.
we decided that consumers will buy it and therefore hence expand it across.
Perfect.
Hmm.
Perfect example.
Hmm. So once this happened, then what should the business do once you've got your product channel fit?
Once you've got one channel, then you keep adding on other channels. You start partnering with, once you've got your Zepto done, you get to Blinkit, Instamart, then you go into Reliance, which is the number Reliance DMart, and try and see if you can get into those channels first. So least fixed costs, then the slightly more fixed costs, and then you go on to GD. That's how people are building the distribution, which is the right way to go about it also. You got to minimize the expenses. So basically, to answer your question, PMF is not a one-time milestone. It's an
Okay.
ongoing validation process that has to pass through the multiple gates an innovation is supposed to pass through.
So now from a PMF point of view, once you've Once you've got a decent handle on it, then the second thing is scaling it up. Now,
Right.
what are the typical challenges that brands face when they're trying to scale up?
Mm. So one we already spoke about, which is your market size. If your market size
Yeah.
is too limited, you
Yeah.
will struggle to scale because you got to keep reinventing the wheel at every
Yeah.
time with new set of customers.
Hmm. Hmm.
Then there is operational complexity. So
Hmm.
you might have done your initial PMF from home in a small setup. Now you have to work with a larger team. You got to get somebody to do your supplies. There's another person running your sales. So, and coordination with them is going to be difficult.
Hmm.
They're going to deliver. So fill rates end up dropping for a lot of FMCG businesses. The
Hmm.
moment they expand from 3, 4 people to 10, 15 people,
Hmm.
the fill rate starts dropping. The product is usually out of stock. So
Hmm.
these things, the team's capability, the ability to work together, all of that becomes a bit of a mix.
Okay.
And that becomes a bottleneck for them. Then quality. So earlier you would have gone to a co-packer, asked him to make it for you. You would have gone through every nitty-gritties, fine-tuned your product. No matter how well you've done it, when you want another factory to do it, you have to go through the entire process again. And you can't
Hmm.
guarantee how these people are going to do it. In fact, I will step away from FMCG and talk about a service client, a retail client I worked with. So this retail client had about very little walk-ins compared to competition.
Mm-hmm.
And their customer satisfaction scores were fantastic.
Okay.
80% of the customers kept coming back to their store. It's furniture business. And how often do people have to repeat furniture purchase? But 80% of them kept coming back at least within the year. And once we did an entire campaign to drive walk-ins to the store, the customer satisfaction levels failed, started going down drastically. And in fact, the previously very satisfied customers started getting angry because they weren't getting the same service.
Hmm.
So the ability to serve the customers walking into the store was not taken care of before we started
Hmm.
driving people to the store.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So your ability to scale and deliver the same experience as you scale becomes a bit of a challenge. So
Yeah.
again, suddenly you said, "Oh, my customer is so satisfied." Suddenly they're unhappy, and it's difficult to pin your point on why they're unhappy.
Understood. And
And the last one is about again unit economics.
uh-huh.
Now, when you say you launched in quick commerce, you got your channel fitment right, you've proven. Now you're going to the next. Let's, for example, just say modern trade. Now, at modern trade, your economics will be different. You'll probably have to do your visibility elements could be different. Here, your visibility elements are variable in quick commerce. Here, it's not variable. So you've not budgeted for it. So not planning your PNL for all of this. I know a founder who did not budget for marketing expenses when he put his unit PNL together.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay.
So these are things that you got to take into account
Hmm.
and make sure just because your product is profitable for now
Hmm.
doesn't mean it's going to be profitable across all channels.
So a lot of them seems to be interlinked to each other. And what it
Absolutely.
also tells me is that there is no respite for a founder. Uh, Once they've struggled hard to reach the stage where their product has cleared the first gate and they have got the PMF, and then scaling up brings its own set of challenges, etc., and
Absolutely.
which need to be dealt with. But yeah, it possibly pays to be flexible, to be agile, and to be open to iterations so that you are able to keep dealing with the change certainties from time to time.
So
Okay, fair.
that's about my homework.
Okay,
Now I'll put it back to you.
this is my classwork now.
This is your classwork now. Given that you worked in B2B and B2C,
Hmm.
how does PMF vary between the two? Because the target audience is different, your sales cycles are different. How would PMF for a B2B business and a B2C business vary, in your opinion?
I'm often asked this question in various forums about
Mhm.
contrast between B2B, B2C. So the principle of PMF is still the same, right? You identify the niche, understand what the target segment wants, create a MVP, and when you start testing, you realize that okay, this is my product market fit. This is how I have to uh, This is how I have to explain it,
Right.
right? So therefore, and that gets the customer to pay for it, and therefore it becomes, like you said, scalable, repeatable, and cost efficient. So the concept is exactly the same. I don't see a difference. However, the difference comes in because of the intrinsic natures of B2B and B2C. B2B process is more long drawn. You're doing more solution selling, and it's in a more intimate setting. You get to meet the buyer, and you get to meet your customer, and then you're able to understand the customer better. So in B2B, you're able to hyper empathize with your customer. You get to know their pain points in real time, and hence I would say that the first thing which is possibly different is that you are also able to hyper customize your PMF.
Hmm.
Your PMF might undergo variety of iterations, and every time you deliver it, you are able to hyper customize it depending on how well you've gotten to understand your customer.
Hmm.
Yeah. Second piece obviously is that in a B2C segment, when you go finally, when you if you cut India into various parts, each part of India is still so huge that you are able to get to a scale regardless of the segmentation that you talk about.
Hmm.
In B2B, you've got to size your segments very well. There is obviously a lot of sizable segments that you can play in, but sizing the segment and then going after, if you have to cross various segments to get to a certain scale, then that will bring its own set of challenges of defining PMF for each segment separately.
Absolutely.
Then the advantage in B2B is that you get instant feedback. You are also able to reason with the customer, and hence gives you an opportunity to hyper iterate, hyper customize. B2C, it's like you've shot an arrow. Now if it hits, great. If it doesn't, so then you will get to know, and then you get another chance at the same or a different customer later. So that's the, I think, broadly how both can be looked at differently.
Hmm.
I think from the challenge, scale up challenge, we spoke about scale up, right? B2C, since the delivery of PMF is centralized, you know that you will be able to get it to a certain quality.
Hmm.
B2B scale up requires number of people speaking to a number of people, and hence all the founders need to find a way in which the PMF can be articulated widely and by a wide set of people in a accurate manner. So it is not just effectiveness but also efficiency at play. So that's something that in B2B segments the founders need to really budget for. Not every person that's taking your PMF to the market will be able to do it as effectively and as efficiently. So that becomes, I think, another round of challenge there.
Right.
I would also say that in a B2B segment, you might be selling a solution that is speaking to the customer's business,
Hmm.
and those business realities will change from time to time, and therefore your PMF must actually respond to that.
Hmm.
Amongst consumers, when we're doing B2C, too often you're targeting some emotion amongst the consumer,
Right.
which largely remains same or similar over a longish period of time.
True.
In a B2B segment, there are cycles of business which requires you to be even more agile,
Hmm.
right? Even within the same year, how people behave in March at the end of a financial year versus how people behave in June or July once their budget have gotten released is very different. So I think, and therefore these are all opportunities to be aware, to get to know your customer well, and then your ability to therefore tweak your PMF statement in a little bit customized manner such that you're able to derive the maximum leverage out of the interaction that you're having with a B2B customer. I think that's how I will segment the two.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Uh, okay.
So, so I would say
Nice.
B2B is definitely more complex due to the longer
Yeah.
sales cycles and there's multiple stakeholders you have to go through. You meet a
Yeah.
person, then you go to his boss, then you go to his boss, and
Yeah.
sometimes the owner is completely different. So,
Yeah.
but once you've gotten it with that client, then your ability to grow that single account is almost limitless.
Yeah.
It is that PMF hook is the hard part, but
Yeah.
after that becomes easy. For the
Yeah.
consumer businesses, it's kind of it's easier to get PMF, but to scale it, it becomes the hard part because of repertoire consumption, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So good. So now possibly I had the safety net. If I wouldn't have performed very well in my classwork, I would have blamed you for the explanation that you have done. So I know you had vested interest in making sure that my classwork comes out well.
You
So
share the
thank you
load.
for that, Sharan. Yeah,
You
yeah,
share
we'll
the load.
certainly share the load. But thank you, Sharan, for doing this. I think gives good clarity on simple definition of PMF, talking about repeatability and scalability in one bucket and the unit economics or the cost efficiency in another. And being aware of the sort of challenges that one might have once you're starting off a business, and the kind of challenges you might encounter when you're scaling it up, just makes this a little bit more interesting and possibly gives our listeners an idea of how to think about PMF in a little more robust manner when you're first deciding to make the statement that I've got the PMF.
Perfect.
Thank you for listening to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net.